Chapter 2, That's Jaywalking. Spencer's head slammed against his desk. His hand slipped from his pocket, releasing his clutch on the bronze medallion. He snapped his head back, gasping for air as he sat bolt upright in his desk. Spencer Zumbro, Mrs. Natcher's voice cut through the stillness of the math-enveloped classroom. It seems you would like to share your answer with the class. Answer? What answer? Mr. Clean had just broken into the prison and put a death sentence on Ellen Zumbro. How could Spencer possibly think about math? Spencer glanced down at his notebook, but he couldn't focus on the page. He had to get home and call his dad immediately. He had to warn Ellen that a giant filth was out to hunt for him. My socks are warm and fuzzy, Spencer said. His face flushed with embarrassment, his eyes darting over to Daisy's desk. But his classmate was somehow the only person in the room who still appeared to be working on the math problem. Excuse me? Mrs. Natcher's gray eyebrows rose, further wrinkling her forehead and pushing back her impossibly tight hairline. My socks are warm and fuzzy, Spencer said it loud and clear this time, wondering why Daisy hadn't come up with a less conspicuous code phrase. They had decided that they needed something to shout in case of an emergency talksite infestation. Spencer had suggested several phrases that might not seem out of place in a classroom. I'm downright confused, or I don't understand this concept. Daisy was too afraid that she'd forget, or worse, that she'd use the phrase in a non-emergency situation. So Daisy insisted on the Gates family emergency code phrase. Your socks are warm and fuzzy? Mrs. Natcher asked. Daisy sprang into action, slamming her math notebook closed and jumping to her feet. Mrs. Natcher spun to face Daisy, giving Spencer a moment to gather some globified supplies from her desk. A Ziploc bag of vacuum dust, a latex glove, and chalkboard eraser. He most likely wouldn't return to the classroom today, and he didn't want Mrs. Natcher to go to find anything if she went snooping. I've got to go, Daisy said. You need a note for an early checkout, answered Mrs. Natcher. Daisy shook her head. To the bathroom, she whispered. Take the hall pass, came the usual answer. Without delay, Daisy crossed the room, grabbed the doll pass, baby, and tucked out the door. Okay, that was not the plan. When the code phrase was spoken, Spencer and Daisy were supposed to help each other leave the classroom. They had rehearsed a number of scenarios that would do the trick. Now Daisy had skipped out the easy way, leaving Spencer to fend for himself. And Baby, the only real ticket out of the classroom, was gone too. Mrs. Natcher swept down the aisle between the desks, a piece of chalk still gripped between her fingers. Spencer sat stunned, partly from Daisy's retreat and partly from Mrs. Natcher's advance. He didn't even realize that he was clutching his globified chalkboard eraser until the teacher pointed it out. So that's what happened to my missing eraser. She reached for the object, but Spencer pulled it away. What? No, he said. This one's mine. He couldn't let Mrs. Natcher get her hands on the globified weapon. I brought it from home. Don't be ridiculous. Mrs. Natcher turned up her nose at him. She held out her hand, palm as flat and stiff as a ruler. She wasn't going to wrestle him for it. Mine, Spencer. What could he do? Gently, like he was placing the winning block in a game of Jenga. Spencer laid the globified eraser on the teacher's outstretched hand. She closed her fingers around it and returned to the front of the room. Even on the best of days, Mrs. Natcher wasn't the most delicate flower. When upset, Spencer knew she was especially heavy-handed at erasing the chalkboard. All she'd have to do was erase her pie chart, and the whole room would fill with paralyzing white chalk dust. Unless he could somehow contain the explosion. The correct answer is 23 more apples than bananas. Mrs. Natcher said. Without even asking who got it right, the teacher swiveled her on her hard heel and slammed the eraser against the chalkboard. As soon as the globified weapon made contact, Mrs. Natcher disappeared in a puff of white chalk dust. It swirled up her arm, overtaking her face and gray hair bun faster than anyone could react. Anyone except Spencer, of course. He had been expecting the worst from the moment he handed over the eraser. As the teacher coughed from within the quickly expanding cloud, Spencer sprinted toward the front of the room, weaving between desks. The classroom was a mix of emotions now. Students began talking all at once, some conversations laced with subdued chuckles. Chalkboard erasers were known to puff if not properly cleaned, and so far the globified cloud hadn't spread enough to look too unnatural. Having previously been a victim of chalk dust, Spencer wisely held his breath. He dove into the puff of whiteness at the front of the room, finding Mrs. Natcher's arm, and grabbing and ripping the eraser out of her grasp. A weapon fell to the floor, and Spencer pounced on it with his lunchbox. He slammed the metal blocks closed, wondering what was happening to his sandwich and pudding peck as the eraser continued to detonate inside. The cloud in the classroom was already thinning. Mrs. Natcher, leaning against the board, the dust on her face and hands made her look somewhat like a zombie, all pale and creepy. Spencer staggered to his feet, gripping his lunchbox in both hands. The thing was shaking as pressure built to a dangerous level. He skirted around the edge of the classroom until he reached the window. Ripping aside the thick paisley curtains, he pulled open the glass, pushed out the screen, and threw his lunchbox as far as he possibly could. Spencer yanked the curtains closed, not even waiting to see if the lunchbox exploded. His classmates were crowding around Mrs. Natcher as she coughed and wheezed. They had no idea that Spencer had just saved them from temporary paralysis. And Spencer had a feeling that thank you would not be among the words he'd hear from Mrs. Natcher if he waited for her to make a full recovery. Spencer quietly backed across the classroom and pushed open the door. He slipped into the hallway just as Daisy rounded the corner. They stopped face to face, one with the baby doll past the other with chalky white hands. Finally, Spencer shrugged. What happened to our escape plan? Sorry, Daisy shrugged back. It was an emergency. She heaved to the baby as proof. I know it was an emergency, Spencer said. That's why I said it. My socks are warm and fuzzy. Daisy's eyes widened. You mean there really is an emergency? I just had to go to the bathroom. Spencer rolled his eyes. Come on, he set off down the hallway, hoping Daisy would follow before Mrs. Natcher came looking. Forgot to call my dad. From the front office? No, Spencer said. It's got to be more private. Maybe your dad can give us a ride to my house. But, Daisy stammered, you heard Mrs. Natcher. You can't check out early without a note. Spencer stopped to face her. She hadn't seen Mr. Clean ride into that prison on a giant extension fill. Daisy didn't understand the danger. It's a matter of life and death, he said. If you want to go back to class, then do it now and pretend like you never saw me out here. But I did see you, Daisy said, so let's go. As soon as they burst through the school's front door, Spencer and Daisy felt the sting of winter on their skin. There hadn't been time to grab coats, especially for Daisy, who had thought she was just going to the bathroom. It was a deceptively bright day, with plenty of sunshine but no warmth for it. Spencer and Daisy ran across the parking lot, trying not to slip on patches of ice. Just outside Mrs. Natcher's classroom was a cloud of white dust from the chalk eraser explosion, so his lunchbox had blown up after all. Good thing he wasn't hungry. Spencer jumped off the sidewalk, his shoes breaking through the crunchy upper layer of snow. This way. That's jaywalking, Daisy said. There's no crosswalk there. Spencer paused in the road. We're running away from school and you're worried about crosswalks? A silver Cadillac suddenly turned the corner, emerging from behind a snow-covered pine tree. Spencer spun around, making eye contact with the driver as the car slipped toward him on the icy road. It was Principal Poach, and he had a mouthful of French fries. Principal screamed, spraying fries onto the windshield. Spencer dove aside, landing safely in the crusty snowbank. As the principal jerked on the wheel, the Cadillac crossed the road, skipped up the curb, and smashed into a streetlight. Daisy was at Spencer's side in a minute, baby tucked under her arm. I'm fine, Spencer said, rising to his feet, but that was Poach. We got to check on him. The hood of the Cadillac was folded around the streetlight. Peering through the driver's window, the kid saw a streak of red oozing from the corner of Principal Poach's mustache. His eyes were closed. He's bleeding, Daisy said. She thrust baby into Spencer's hand and jerked open the door. Spencer shook his head, pointing to the McDonald's bag on the seat and the spewed French fries on the dashboard. It's ketchup. The word ketchup seemed to bring Principal Poach around. His little tongue reached out, lapping at the red sauce in his mustache. He muttered something under his breath. Spencer thought it was cheeseburger, but suddenly Principal Poach was completely revived and alert. 24 years I have driven to this road to Welcher Elementary, and I have never seen such bad behavior. The principal struggled to climb from the crashed car, his weight wedging him behind the steering wheel. He threw his bulk forward once, twice. Third time was the charm, and Poach rolled out onto the snowbank. Should have known it would be you, the principal said. looking at Spencer as he rose, panting to his feet. Should have known you'd be standing in the middle of the road with your baby doll trying to make me crash. It's not my doll, Spencer said. It's Mrs. Natchez. The principal's face, already reddish hue from anger and exertion, turned a shade of purple as he pointed a hot-dog-shaped finger directly at Spencer. Stealing Mrs. Natchez's things, eh? Theft of school property? We didn't steal it, Spencer said, holding out the doll. It's the hall pass. Ha, 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 Principal Poach laughed. The creaking sounds of his wrecked car were working him into unhealthy hysteria. Hall passes are for hallways, not roads. Sorry, Daisy said. We got lost. The big man rested a pudgy hand on the crumpled hood of his once shiny vehicle. It was new, you know. He nodded, jowls quavering. New car. Christmas gift from the missus. A tear slipped down his ample cheek. Now how am I supposed to explain the ketchup stain on the front seat? Spencer started backing away. He'd heard about people going into shock after a car crash. This didn't look like shock. Principal Poach was going crazy. Suspended, Poach shouted. Both of you are suspended for the rest of the month. Wait a minute, Spencer said. What? You can't suspend us like this? Getting suspended was for kids like Des, not hardworking students like Spencer and Daisy. Suspended! He shooed them away, clearly wanting some time alone to grieve over his smashed Cadillac. Spencer tugged at Daisy's arm, and the two of them began a hesitant retreat. And when you come back, Poach shouted. No, if you come back, you better bring that stolen doll pass.